Early this morning, Julian Assange heads to Stansted Airport to catch a private jet out of the UK. He's due to appear at a court in the Northern Mariana Islands, a US Commonwealth in the Pacific, where he will plead guilty to one charge of conspiring to obtain and disclose classified US defence documents.
The case has dragged on for too long. There's nothing to be gained by his continued incarceration, and we want him brought home to Australia.
For 5 years, Julian Assange has been held in London's high-security Belmarsh prison. Arrested in 2019 for breaching bail on an unrelated charge, he was sentenced to 50 weeks jail, but then kept in detention while he fought an extradition order to the United States. Prior to that, Julian Assange spent 7 years in self-imposed exile in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. His wife, Stella, led a global campaign for his freedom.
We free Julian, we regain our democracy.
The plea deal resolves 18 criminal charges brought against him by the US government over the leaking of 490,000 activity reports on the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, hundreds of briefs on Guantanamo Bay detainees, and 250,000 Department of State cables. The trove also included this notorious video of a US military helicopter killing civilians in Baghdad in 2007.
Come on, fire!
The Trump administration argued the leaks jeopardized national security and put sources at risk of harm.
We will go after people who leak classified information. We will prosecute them to the full extent of the law. This is playing with our nation's national security.
Just hours ago, Stella Assange spoke of her immense relief.
It's a whirlwind of emotions. I mean, I'm just elated. Frankly, it's just incredible. I don't know. Feels like it's not real.
Gabriel Shipton is Julian Assange's brother. Gabriel Shipton, welcome to 7:30 on this quite extraordinary day for you and your family.
Yeah, good to be with you, Sarah.
Can you just start by describing the feeling that you had watching that little piece of footage of Julian crossing the tarmac to board the plane?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting there to be footage of him getting on the plane, but it was nice. Nice to see him moving around, and he looked quite sprightly going up those stairs. So it's nice to see him free. You know, not inside the prison. The last time I saw him was in the visitors' room inside Belmarsh prison. So it's great to see him in the daylight. We're very relieved that he's out of that prison, but he's not quite home yet. He has to get through a few more hurdles before he's safe and sound on Australian soil. So we've got all our fingers and toes crossed, hoping that all goes smoothly and that he can be with Stella and the kids and my dad, who are all greeting him at the airport when he arrives, hopefully tomorrow.
And just before we go through the last steps that he has to go through, just for you, when did you find out and how did you find out?
I've been chatting to Julian most of this week as he's been preparing, to get on this flight and the last little bits and pieces that needed to happen for this all to come together. So, yeah, we've, he's been very excited, a little bit anxious, but mostly excited about actually, being free after all these years. It's over 13 years in one form of detention or another in the United Kingdom. I mean, I personally don't like the United Kingdom much myself, so I can understand how he would be very relieved to be on a plane out of there and back home to Australia.
So how long has Julian known that he was going to be released from Belmarsh?
Look, I can't put an exact date on it, but yeah, as I said, I've been chatting to him over the past weeks about the finalisation of the little bits and pieces that all needed to come together. And yeah, I can't really put an exact date on when it's happening, but this has been such a long process, and it's part of a larger campaign that's been going on around the world. You've had world leaders all coming out speaking about Julian, calling for his freedom, such as President Lula, the Mexican President AMLO, as well as the Prime Minister, who has been calling for his freedom multiple times to the Biden administration, and the Australian public, who have been incredibly supportive of Julian, advocating for him, and as well as the Australian media, who have become relentless in covering this case and educating the public about what this actually means for them.
And just before we come to how this has been achieved, you just referred to the fact that there are just a couple more steps to go. We know that he's on a plane on the way to the Mariana Islands. Can you explain what those final steps are?
Well, he has to go and submit his plea before a judge in the Mariana Islands, and then the plea has to be accepted by the judge. And then once that's done, he can get on a plane and fly to Australia. So those are the final steps. So it's not quite over yet, and we really need these last bits to go smoothly. So I can't really comment too much on the content of the plea or anything like that. So those are the last steps. So it's a very nervous time, obviously, that we have to get through these last bits and pieces, but hopefully he's home soon, and yeah, he's most of the way back now, so I can't really see any hiccups coming, but you're not quite there yet.
And just explain to the audience why he's going to this somewhat obscure location in the Pacific, the Mariana Islands.
Well, he has to hand his plea before an American judge in an American territory. So that's why he's going to the Mariana Islands, which is the closest American territory to Australia. And so this was all put together by the Australian government. Credit to them and their advocacy. Stephen Smith, the UK High Commissioner, as well as Kevin Rudd, have been relentless working on this behind the scenes to make this happen. So all credit to the Australian government there for organising and putting this all together. But yeah, it's getting to that US territory, that US jurisdiction, putting that plea deal before a US judge, having that judge accept that deal, and then travelling onward to Australia. So he still has to get to the Mariana Islands, has to do this deal, and then has to get on a plane. So we're not quite there yet, but I think everybody's so relieved and so happy that this is finally happening. It's been a bloody slog for Julian's family and everyone who's been out there supporting him, relentlessly campaigning for him. And I think we're all looking forward to sitting back, having a beer or a champagne and celebrating him being back in Australia.
And are there members of the Australian government, are there representatives of the government travelling with him?
Yeah, I believe there are, but I can't confirm.
I mean, whose idea was it to go to the Mariana Islands? It's kind of a brilliant solution, and it avoids him having to go to the continental United States, obviously.
Yeah, I'm not actually sure whose idea what it was, but I think it is a good neat solution to be able to get that plea before a US judge, which without setting foot on continental United States, it's very close to Australia. And so it's sort of on the way home, really, on the way home for Julian. So we're just hopefully it all works out, and I'm sure the Australian public is going to be watching along with bated breath. There are people who are tracking his jet on flight radar, so I'm sure the Australian public is going to be watching very closely what's going on, as well as the Australian government and a lot of people around the world. The response has really been overwhelming. I literally have hundreds and hundreds of messages, hundreds of missed calls on my phone of people ringing, saying congratulations, saying job well done. But I have to give credit to everyone out there who has been tirelessly working on this campaign for so many years. Everyone should just give themselves a pat on the back, because this has been a monumental campaign, and this is its culmination now. So yeah, we're so close.
we're so close. Let me just ask you a question about how this has unfolded, because, of course, the next stage in the proceedings was to be the appeal that he had been given leave to make in London. Is that what changed the direction? Is that what brought this on, that he was to have a proper appeal heard in London?
Look, I think it's one of the elements, of course. The appeal the appeal in London boiled down to the freedom of expression grounds related to the Extradition Act in the UK. And the appeal was going to be heard that the US DOJ would argue that Julian is not entitled to First Amendment rights because he's an Australian if he's extradited. And the UK judges said Julian had a valid appeal point, that his freedom of expression rights would be violated if he was extradited to the United States. So I don't believe the US DOJ really wanted to have an appeal around these freedom of expression grounds being heard in the UK courts. So I think it did contribute to the motivation and the push for this deal at this time. But it was only just one element. This has been such a huge campaign. There have been so many people working on this. There are many, many people in the United States Congress people, congressmen and women who have been advocating for Julian. I've done many trips over there to the United States, really working the levers over there. Kevin Rudd, the ambassador in Washington, has also been working the levers in Washington to make this happen. So I think all these elements have contributed, and of course the support of the Australian public. I think we cannot deny that the Australian public has really supported the government in their efforts to bring this to a close. And I think that support from the Australian government, I think, has been monumental. The resolution that passed the House of Representatives in February, really changed the tone of the UK courts. And I think the UK courts were really seeing the writing on the wall now that the Australian state wanted to bring this to a close, and that this could potentially be a very embarrassing prosecution for the United States during an election season. So,
but you're saying,
it's
Gabriel,
hard to really pinpoint
yes,
what exactly changed. But
you're saying that you think that the activity by the Australian government actually played into what was happening in the UK.
100%. I believe that the actions by the Australian Parliament and by the Australian government and the Australian people really led to this position, because the Australian government are the only ones who can represent Julian diplomatically. And if Julian didn't have that support of this government, then they wouldn't be able to put this deal together and have him returning to Australia to be a free man. And so I think it's all credit to the Australian people for advocating with their government, and the Australian government for carrying out the wish of the Australian public. There was a poll a couple of weeks ago that said over 70% of the Australian public wanted Julian brought back, and I think that is really what's been at play and led the Australian government to take these actions to support Julian in coming home.
Gabriel, you've a few more hours to go before final resolution, but you are clearly now in the final moments. Thank you very much indeed for taking time to speak to us on this particular day. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. And thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.